Hello, Brubs. We're back with The Beautiful Side of Evil by Johanna Michaelsen. I believe we're in the title chapter. Yep. And The Beautiful Side of Evil. The 6 days following my first meeting, recounted earlier with Pachita, were spent in deep mental and spiritual preparation. I sensed I was on the brink of my life's work and ultimate fulfillment in my search for God. I knew the years of fear were over. My spirit guides, Jesus and Mamacita, were with me, teaching me to overcome the lower spiritual entities. Now, during the many hours spent in meditation, waves of light and peace would flow over me, pushing away the darkness. On Friday, July 27th, 1971, the morning of the 7th day, I returned to see Pachita. Father Humberto and Peggy asked to go with me. Padre Humberto, or is it Umberto, a Catholic priest and movie actor, had broken his leg in a car accident and was living at the mind control house in Cuernavaca while he discovered. I don't think he had met Pachita before. He hoped Hermanito Cuauhtémoc, that is, little brother, as the spirit who worked through Pachita was affectionately called, would heal his leg so he could return to the work he was doing with lepers in a colony near Tabaslan. Peggy, who was also living at the mind control house, had an operation at Pachita's about 5 weeks before. Hermanito had begun plugging the holes in her skull, which was decalcifying. He had also removed an inoperable brain tumor. The red scar was clearly visible on the back of her head when she pulled her hair apart to show me. Daddy decided to join us that day. He was profoundly skeptical of the things he had heard about Pachita, but was wearing his I'm determined to be open minded about this look, so I was hopeful he would eventually accept her. We arrived at Pachita's around 11:30 in the morning. The courtyard was already crowded with people waiting to see Hermanito. Many had been there since before dawn. Several women were organizing the crowd in preparation for Hermanito's arrival. Married women and their children were to be seen first, then the men, and last of all the unmarried women. Entrance coupons were sold for 10 pesos each, about 80 American cents at the time. Young children and the very poor were not charged. I later learned this fee was a recent innovation devised by her assistants to help support Pachita, whose failing health no longer allowed her to go out on the street selling trinkets and lottery tickets. She herself had never charged for the healings. Each person in line was instructed to have a fresh raw egg to present to Hermanito for the spiritual limpia cleansing, which was performed on everyone during the morning consultation sessions. I had forgotten our eggs and hurried out with several others in the line to purchase them at the market across the street. I handed Daddy, Peggy, and Padre Umberto their eggs, then took my place in line to wait. When my turn finally came, I entered the dark little anteroom, still guarded by Falcon Ursula, and waited behind the plastic curtain with one of the assistants who monitored the flow of people into the altar room. I could feel powerful vibrations emanating from that room and started to pull the curtain aside to see what was happening, but the woman quickly stopped me. No, she whispered. Keep it shut until the patient in there leaves. The curtain is here to keep any evil airs that person may have brought with him from attacking you. I see, I mumbled apologetically. Is this your first consultation with Ermenito? Her voice softened. I nodded. Then be sure you remember not to address him as Pachita. It is her body you will see, but she is not in it. I nodded again. Tom had explained that to me before. Pachita was always addressed in the masculine and as Hermanito when the spirit was present. Minutes later, the woman pulled aside the plastic curtain for me and I stepped in. What do you got, bruvs? Pachita was standing near the altar. She was wearing a short sleeved cotton dress covered by a dirty yellow satin garment that was tied in a knot at the shoulder. It was decorated with sparkles glued on in geometric designs and was worn by Pachita whenever Hermanito Kua, Kua Tamak was holding consultation sessions or operations. Pachita's eyes were tightly shut, one of the signs that Pachita herself, her spirit, was no longer there. Yet it was as though she saw clearly. I was later to watch her deftly thread a needle, even though her eyes could not possibly have seen to do so. There were three other assistants in the room, an old Mexican woman who stood to Pachita's right and held a plastic bottle filled with a sweet smelling balsam, then a young man, an engineer and Yaqui Indian, whom I later came to know as Chalio, acted as secretary, writing down any prescriptions or medications prescribed. The book is The Beautiful Side of Evil. The third person stood by the exit door to usher people out when their time with Hermanito was over. I stood before Hermanito, still holding the egg in my hand. He placed both hands on my shoulders, and, in a voice much deeper and gruffer than Pachita's own, commanded, A trabajar, Aita, to work, my little daughter. A strange shock ran through my body as his hands touched me. How do I begin, Hermanito? I asked as he took the egg and began rubbing it briskly over my head and shoulders. He tossed the egg at the bucket that stood near him. It splattered on the floor. Hermanito nodded towards Mimo, Pachita's oldest son, who was sitting on the cot. The son of my flesh will give you instructions. Hermanito always spoke of Pachita in the third person, calling her mi carne, or my flesh. He cupped his right hand towards the woman standing by him, who filled it with the sweet smelling balsam with which all who came before him were anointed. He rubbed it between his palms, then placed both hands firmly upon my head as he murmured something I could not understand. Then he brushed his hands down my body as though whisking lint off my clothing, front and back. Again his hands grasped my shoulders, and the sightless eyes peered into my own. Ah, trabajar. Mimo stepped outside with me as I left. What did Hermanito mean, Mimo? I asked him. Mimo looked at me coldly. Oddly, I should say. Hermanito is telling you that you will work as a full trance medium, that you will one day heal as my mother does. You are to begin preparing immediately. Come back this Monday. Hermanito himself will tell you what you must do. Padre Umberto had also been told to return on Monday. Hermanito had promised to give him a cure for leprosy. As for Papa, his reception was cool. Hermanito seemed to have a kind of X-ray vision and could diagnose the exact disease or discomfort of the person before him without having been given a clue. It was odd that he should have asked Father what the matter was. Papa was not well at all at the time, but to test Hermanito had answered, "Oh, nothing. I'm fine. Why, in that case, Ermenito said with excessive politeness, this house is at your service when required. Several weeks later, Padre Umberto and I waited in Pachita's living room for hours. We had been told to be there at noon. It was now 6 o'clock in the evening, and still Pachita was not there. A small television set, a gift from a grateful American patient, had been blaring forth some highly obnoxious soap operas all afternoon. Pachita's daughter wanted to hear it in her bedroom. I spent the time recording the events of the last several weeks in my diary and feeding bits of meat to Ursula. It was beginning to get dark, and the thunderclouds were thick and gray. It's going to be pouring on the way home, I thought dismally as I walked back to the living room. The mountain pass between Mexico City and Cuernavaca could be treacherous any time, but especially so in the rain. At 6:15, Mimo and Pachita arrived. Mama threw me a dark look as he walked by. He nodded curtly but said nothing. Pachita went into the kitchen to have supper. As always, a group of people had gathered to see Hermanito. One was a rather large girl who had a bandage wrapped around her neck. Her mother told me the girl had been the victim of a curse. A year or so before, she had become very ill, but none of the many doctors she had seen had been able to give a diagnosis. Finally, they found their way to Pachita through a friend. A week ago, Hermanito had operated on her, materializing and removing a very large tarantula from her throat. The thing was to be kept in a box for a specified period of time, but had somehow escaped. The mother was worried perhaps the girl might need another removal of the curse. I learned later that she did not. After her supper, Pachita entered the altar room. We were told Hermanito would give only consultus consultations that night. There were to be no operations. There was an exclamation of dismay from a woman who had been waiting patiently for several hours. Oh, please, Hermanito told me last week he would operate on me tonight. My cataract operation at the hospital is scheduled in 4 days. Please let Hermanito operate on me tonight. Well, said Pachita, shrugging her shoulders, it is up to Hermanito. We will ask him during the consultation, the consultus, and see what he says. Pachita lumbered across the courtyard and into the altar room with three of her associates. One by one, the people who needed to see Hermanito, filed in. I was about to go in myself when Pachita came out. She patted Rita on the shoulder. Prepare yourself. Hermanito will operate tonight, after all. Several minutes later, Amado, a man who had been with Pachita for over 11 years, asked Rita to enter the altar room. Only three other people will be allowed to enter to witness the operation, he announced. Her husband Alex was immediately by her side. Padre Umberto went in, as did another man who had been there several times before. Pachita looked at me as she walked by. You too, little daughter, come along. It was beginning to rain. The sound of the large drops was magnified as they pelted the tin roof of the altar room. Water was beginning to seep under the door and onto the coarse cement floor. Everything seemed drained of color, reflecting, rather, the flat gray of the thunderclouds above us. A candle was lit and placed upon the altar. The single naked light bulb was switched off. Pachita put on Hermanito's satin robe and sat on the straight back wooden chair in front of the altar. She told us to gather around her and pray. The scrawny woman stood at Pachita's side, holding the ever present bottle of protective, holy balsam. She poured some into Pachita's hands and began a low chanting prayer, which she which she uttered almost inaudibly as Pachita rubbed the balsam over her hands. into her hair and down the front of her body. She closed her eyes, placed her hands straight and stiff on her spread knees, and began taking deep breaths. The atmosphere in the room seemed to thicken as a powerful, unseen presence descended upon Pachita. Suddenly her body quivered violently, her right hand raised in a sharp, straight arm salute, and a deeper, stronger voice than hers announced, Estoy con ustedes, hermanos queridos. I am with you, beloved brothers. Pachita had vacated the shell of her body to make way for Hermanito. Hermanito arose and directed Rita to sit in the chair. Rita, obviously nervous, did so. Keep praying, my little ones, Hermanito said to us. Only with God's will and help will we be able to heal this woman's eye. Chalio stood behind Rita on Hermanito's left side. He had cut large strips of cotton from the roll Alex had brought. Smaller patches were placed in a small bowl, and alcohol was poured over them. Hermanito's one concession to physical antiseptics. Alex had been standing beside his wife, but but now he turned away and sat on the cot. Head in his hands, he had helped in a number of operations in the past, but he chose to pray during this one. Hermanito called me to his side. Come, little daughter, you will help me. He instructed me to hold a large block of cotton under Rita's chin. Rita, Hermanito said, I want you to sit very still now. Keep your eyes open and looking up at the ceiling. Do you understand me, little one? Is it going to hurt me, Hermanito? She asked, her voice quivering as she spoke. No, little one, you are even now being anesthetized. Hermanito said reassuringly as he stroked her hair. He took the new bottle of alcohol I was holding, opened it, and poured it directly into her eye. I gasped, expecting the woman to cry out, but she just sat there. Then Hermanito sprinkled some of the balsam on the eye. Very well, little one, now hand me the cotton you have there. As I handed him the smaller cotton strips, he formed a square, leaving the eye exposed in the center. He had stepped behind Rita and to her left. I moved directly in front of her, my knees brushing against hers. Then he asked Amado for the scissors and the old knife that lay on the altar. Amado quickly wiped each with a square of cotton soaked in balsam and handed the scissors to him. Hermanito took the scissors and raised them in a salute toward the altar as he began a prayer in Nahuatl, the ancient Aztec language. His first words were audible, then died down to a whisper. As he prayed, I saw that the area where we stood, and especially around Rita's head, became much brighter than the rest of the room, as though a soft spotlight were shining down on us. I could see clearly I was to witness this phenomenon at each of the several hundred operations in which I assisted in the coming months. Pray to God, little ones. Hermanito pushed one point of the scissors into Rita's eye and began to cut. A pale reddish white liquid trickled into a piece of cotton that fell off her face and dropped onto her chest. I caught it and replaced it, my face only inches from her eye. Do you feel pain, little one? He asked her. No, Hermanito, Rita answered. Her head began to turn as she spoke. Keep your eyes open, open. He took the knife from Amato, raised it in a salute, then began peeling a thin, opaque scum off the center of the eye. It broke. He placed the first piece on the cotton I held out. Then he gently lifted off the second part of the tissue and handed it to me. Again he poured alcohol into the eye, then placed a clean pad of cotton over it. We have finished, dear brother, he said to Chalio. You may bandage the eye now. When the job of bandaging was done to his satisfaction, he instructed two men to wrap Rita in a sheet and carry her across the courtyard to rest in the house. Keep her lying down for 1 hour, head back, then give her some red herb tea to drink. You'll find it in the kitchen. Alex was instructed to keep her quiet for 3 days, after which the bandage could be removed. The entire procedure had taken perhaps 15 minutes. Chalio handed Hermanito a large piece of cotton soaked in balsam with which to cleanse his hands. A week later, I learned that Rita's operation at the hospital had been canceled. The doctors were astonished at the total disappearance of the cataract. The room became darker now. I became aware again of the rain, which was now pounding violently on the tin roof. The water on the floor where I stood was about half an inch deep. As Rita was carried out, Hermanito sat down on the chair, legs spread, hands on his knees. Padre Umberto approached him. I saw Hermanito take his hand and pat it warmly as he smiled. I had moved out of the way to the back of the room and couldn't hear what was said. Padre Umberto later told me Hermanito had instructed him to continue his mission to the lepers and gave him a recipe based on the juice of ground buzzards, which would cure leprosy and certain forms of cancer. Then Padre turned to me and called me to them. Hermanito took my hand. This is the girl who will help you with your lepers. She is ready now to work as a full medium. In 3 weeks, another spirit whom I have sent and even now is with her will begin to work through her. I thought of Mamacita. Hermanito then told us that for 3 weeks, either on a Thursday or a Monday, Padre and I were to meet either at 2 o'clock in the afternoon or at 8 o'clock in the evening. You are both to pray. You, my little daughter, watch me closely. You're to sit in a straight chair with your hands in your lap, thus, even as you saw my flesh earlier this evening. Relax and breathe deeply. Go down to level as you have learned. Then do this with your hands. Here he showed a special circular movement of the hands. Then place your hands again on your lap and wait. Padre, when you see her hands begin to shake and rise from her lap, you are to place your own hands over hers and say, I give you the light of the Lord. May the light of the Lord be with you. Pray continually that no evil overtake her. May the Lord go with you, little ones. That Thursday, Padre Umberto and I met as Hermanito had ordained. Almighty God, I prayed before we began, more than anything else, you know I love you and want to serve you. Help me now become an instrument of your hand. I give myself to you, O Lord. Guide us now in this work. Help us discern what is false and of our imagination from what is of you. Protect us from any evil being who would hinder this work which you have set before me. Let your perfect will be done, holy God. I performed the motion with my hands, then breathed deeply and relaxed. Almost immediately, I felt myself encircled by a golden glow. My hands began to feel very, very light and detached from the rest of my body and began to rise. From far away, I heard Padre's voice. I give you the light of the Lord. May the light of the Lord be with you. I was surrounded by a large number of people who stood in a circle around me, shadowy, unknown figures which were touched with the golden glow that now had expanded to include them. Pachita's spirit, more solid than the rest, stood before me. Quadamak, towering just behind her, his figure almost merging with her own. Mamacita, my Indian counselor, stood by her. Then I saw my counselor, Jesus, translucent, shimmering with a glow brighter than all the rest. My spirit stood, and I approached him with my hands outstretched. Again, a flame of purification was in his hand. He poured the flames into my hands. They burned and yet were cold, and I was filled with joy and peace. It seemed that the Lord had heard my prayers and had sanctified my hands to his use. The second week, the feeling during our session was quite different. I saw two giant golden doors which slowly swung open, then shut again before I could pass through them. The figures which had surrounded me the week before stood on the other side, beside a large book which lay open on an invisible stand. I knew that the mysteries of life were contained within its pages. Suddenly the doors swung open and did not shut. I walked through and stood before the book, a towering figure. He placed it in my hands. A towering figure, like an angel in its flowing robe, stood behind it. He placed it in my hands, but I knew the time had not yet come to read from it. I knew many sorrows, many trials must be faced and overcome before I would be worthy to read and understand. O God, my spirit prayed, grant me the courage, faith, and perseverance to obey your will. After that session with Padre Umberto, I drove into Mexico City as often as I could to be at Pachita's. That Monday and Tuesday I was asked to stand at the curtain at the entrance of the altar room. Tom told me to be sure to be at the mind control house rather than at Pachita's. On Wednesday, however, Hermanito had promised to operate on a 72-year-old man who had flown in from Los Angeles to see him. A large group of mind control people gathered to witness the event, but the hours dragged on and still Pachita did not arrive. We assumed, perhaps, Hermanito had operated that night at her home after all, and that she would arrive later, but by midnight still no word had come. There was no phone at Pachita's as yet, so several of us decided to drive the 40 minutes to her house to see what had happened. There was a light on when we arrived, so we knocked. Enrique, one of her sons, opened the gate. Sorry you can't see her. Everyone has just gone to bed, he said. No, wait, I'm up, Pachita called from the living room. I'm sorry I couldn't come. The government people have been here all day. Seems they think I'm practicing medicine without a license. She smiled broadly. What do they know? The fools. Anyway, we raised enough to pay them off. They won't be back for a while. She waved a hand at me. Come, little one, help me get my things. I will come with you. We walked into the altar room. She handed me various things to put into a large, empty bag for her. Hermanito's cloak, the balsam, some hospital kidney bowls, a new bottle of alcohol, and a jar which contained two vertebrae. My friend in the morgue got these for me this morning. A poor man was run over last night. Then she handed me Hermanito's knife, which I also placed in the bag. Human parts were not always used in the operations. It was not any more necessary than the use of anesthesia or antiseptics. When we returned to the house, Mr. Smith and his wife were awakened and told to prepare. Pachita had a quick cup of coffee, then went in to examine him. She prodded and pushed on his back, asking where it hurt. Then she took a small clean glass which I brought from the kitchen. At her request, I lit a match and briefly held it to the mouth of the glass. There was a small exploding sound within the glass as she quickly pressed the rim down into the small of his back. The skin began to bulge and rise, becoming a dark purple as it grew. Pachita nodded to herself. Move him to the floor now. A large clear plastic sheet had been made ready at the foot of the bed. Mr. Smith stretched face down upon it. A large candle was lit and placed on a bureau near him. Many of the mind control group who had been there earlier that evening had reassembled and now crowded into the room to watch. A rare event, for usually only a few witnesses were allowed. Meanwhile, after a pair of scissors had finally been located, Pachita had me cut strips of cotton from a new roll. Some of the strips were placed in the little kidney bowls and soaked with alcohol. Others were soaked in the balsam, while still others were kept dry. Pachita put on her robe, rubbed the balsam over her hair and clothes, and sat in a straight chair to await Hermanito. After a few moments, she shuddered and her arm raised in the now familiar salute. I am with you, my little ones. Pachita's eyes were tightly shut. Hermanito motioned to me. Come, my daughter, you will assist me tonight. We knelt by Mr. Smith. I was on Hermanito's left. Someone go and talk to the man during the operation and translate to him for me. Hold his hand, keep him talking. I don't want him to lose consciousness. One of the women knelt by Mr. Smith's head and began speaking softly to him. Hermanito had me pull up Mr. Smith's pajama top and fold his waistband down just enough to expose the lower back. I handed him a piece of alcohol soaked cotton, which he rubbed briskly over the old man's back. 4 large pieces of dry cotton were arranged in a square, leaving the spinal area where he would operate uncovered. He took the scissors in his hand and looked up at the intense faces in the room. Lift your thoughts to God, my little ones, pray. Ask him if he is in pain. No, he wasn't. Hermanito plunged one end of the scissors into his back. Mr. Smith groaned as it penetrated his skin. I saw the scissors disappear into the back. I heard the flesh being cut. My hands on either side of the wound felt a warm, thick liquid flow into the cotton. Mr. Smith groaned again. Keep him talking. Is he feeling pain? Ask him. Yes, some, but he could bear it. Hermanito pulled the scissors out. He took his knife, raised it in supplication, and pushed it into Mr. Smith's back. I felt a fresh surge of warm liquid ooze up from the wound and over my fingers on the cotton. Hermanito cut away for several minutes, then reached in and pulled out what seemed to be an odd shaped bone covered with blood and bits of red flesh. This is one of the vertebrae, little one. It is badly damaged. Hermanito then took a bone from the jar. As he did, I looked down into the dark, gaping wound in Mr. Smith's back and felt a moment of panic. My God, how will this ever close and be whole again? But then Hermanito turned and looked at me through those tight shut eyes, and I felt a deep peace take the place of fear. God was with us. Hermanito placed the bone inside the hole, then turned the knife upside down, and with the blunt side hammered the bone into place. There was a dull, squishing sound as if thudded against the wet, raw flesh. Mr. Smith groaned. He was in pain. Keep him talking, little one, Hermanito ordered the woman by Mr. Smith's side. He must not pass out. Hermanito's voice was urgent. He cut out a second piece of bone inside the back and repeated the process. Are you watching closely, little daughter? Hermanito asked me softly. I nodded affirmatively. Affirmatively. This poor man, Hermanito said. No wonder he has been in pain. There is a small tumor at the bone of his spine. Again, the knife went into the wound. Suddenly, incredible stench filled the room. Instinctively, I lifted my hand up to my face, but Hermanito grabbed it and placed it back inside the wound. Hold the tissue taut, little daughter. I must remove his tumor. It is cancerous. He cut something loose just above my fingers and pulled out a round, stringy mass of flesh about the size of a golf ball, which he then wrapped in cotton to be disposed of. Hermanito took a large piece of cotton, which I handed him, and swept the bloody cotton aside. Passing his hand over the wound, it closed as he did so. We wrapped Mr. Smith with a piece of sheet, as in the confusion of the night no one had thought to bring a regular bandage. Hermanito supervised for a few minutes and then announced he was leaving. We lifted Mr. Smith onto the bed. The pain he had been feeling before the operation was gone, and there was new, fresh color in his face. He was smiling and talking. Yes, he had left Erminito working inside his back. He had felt pain, but he was fine now. Several of us went into the living room for coffee. Pachita was watching me intently. Suddenly, the look in her eyes changed. It was as though flames were leaping out at me. For a moment, I flashed back at the eyes I had seen at Playmakers. She leaned forward and spoke to me in an unknown tongue. It sounded like Nahuatl. Then, as suddenly as the spirit had appeared, it was gone. Pachita took my hand and asked where my mother was. Mamma had come into the city with me that day, too, reluctantly witnessed the operation with me. I introduced her to Pachita. You are a fortunate mother. Your daughter has a very special mission in life. She will one day be able to heal, even as I do. You must begin preparing yourself to help her in case an emergency should arise. She will have great need of you. Mamma was almost as stunned as I was. I had not mentioned to her or anyone else besides Padre Umberto what Erminito had told me. Now a public announcement had been made of it. Later that night, I went back with Pachita to her home. Once there, she gave me a bottle of red herbal liquid and told me to be sure Mr. Smith drank some of it for 2 days. He was to keep the bandage on for 3 days, rest in bed, and eat no pork whatever during this time. When we returned to the house, I gave Mr. Smith a glass of the liquid. He was happy and excited. He got up and walked slowly to the bathroom and back. I saw that his new yellow pajamas were stained with blood in the back, as was his bandage and the bed sheets. His wife and I changed the sheets and his pajamas and put him back to bed. It was past 3:30 in the morning. I lay in bed thinking about the things I had seen. Was it possible it had all been a trick? Had it all been sleight of hand and a fraud? Had I been hypnotized? The replacement of the vertebrae was medically impossible, but my face was only inches from the wound. I myself had placed the strips of cotton I had cut on his skin. No one else had handled them. And I had a clear view of Pachita's hands, which were open, fingers spread, nothing was palmed in them. At no time did she pull anything out from under her tunic. The dress she wore had no pockets, anyhow, and I had felt the warm blood pulse over my hands. Oh, shit. My hands were in the wound. Blood was smeared to my wrist from it. But what she did was impossible. That's right, for any human doctor. But the being working through Pachita was not human. He was supernatural. He was beyond the realm of physical laws as we know them. As so, the effects and works which he performed were also supernatural and not bound by conventional rules. We are surrounded by the souls of those who have gone on. Some have reached a higher plane than others. Some, perhaps even Erminito, are closer to God and can therefore produce wonderful miracles. Others were unquestionably evil and cruel, like the horrors with which I had been acquainted for so long. Many of those whom these evil ones succeeded in possessing have become incurably insane and locked forever in the asylums. That probably would have been my fate if not for mind control and Erminito. I added to myself, but those holy ones who chose to interlock their disembodied spirits with a human body which acted as a medium for them could indeed perform wonders and miracles. Kim was wrong. This work of Pachita's was not satanic. How could it be? For years I had experienced the workings of those tied to Satan. Now I was experiencing the workings of God. The feeling between the two was so totally different. I could tell the difference. Was there not a crucifix on the altar and a picture of Jesus? I had seen nuns and priests there sprinkling holy water throughout the room and reciting the rosary. All glory was given to my Father and Lord. We were constantly told to elevate our thoughts to God and to say the Lord's Prayer. Besides, what purpose would Satan have in healing and doing good works and in casting out devils? As Dr. Carlos had told me happened, and which I was soon to witness. Dr. Carlos was no credulous fool either. He was a respected surgeon with his own practice and a large pharmaceutical company. He had for several months now been working as one of Pachita's principal assistants, as I had done that night. He had assisted in dozens of operations and was in constant amazement at what he had seen Hermanito do. No, there was no question in my mind that what Pachita did was supernatural and found its ultimate source in God. I was therefore determined I should work there to learn and serve as best as I could. I praised God again and again for having led me there. Mom and I drove back to Cuernavaca the next morning. That night, the Padre and I met for our last session. My sense of excitement and anticipation was high. I had seen awesome things and my mission had been confirmed. It was during this meeting that I would become a full trance medium, as Hermanito had predicted. The now familiar procedures were followed. I went to level and waited. Suddenly, I felt myself sinking deeper and deeper. I felt something deep within me wrench away. My body seemed to fade. I looked down and could see my empty shell sitting straight in a chair. Hands floating, palms up, I was aware of being far away in a new space beyond where I had been before. I had passed through a deep darkness, but now everything was filled with a pure white light. I now fully understood that my essence, my spirit, did not have to be tied down into the sack of flesh beneath me. It had been given me for a while to facilitate. It had been given me for a while to facilitate the work which lay ahead, to help fulfill my karma and purify my spirit so it could rejoin God. But I was eternal, an inseparable part of the living force. Thoughts like these had come to me before, but now, floating far above, I was experiencing it. I was filled with ecstasy. There was no time, no sorrow, no pain, only vibrating, unbearable joy and light and peace beyond anything I had yet experienced. I looked down. A silent, incandescent figure stood by my body, waiting, waiting, yet not possessing me. Then, from a great distance, I heard an earthly voice calling to me. I couldn't understand the words at first, but they persisted. Johanna, Johanna, come back. It's time to come back. It's time to rest. Oh, it was so hard to obey that voice. It was so beautiful where I was, and I wanted to go on. But I was drawn back. I felt my body again. It was like lead and drained of all energy. Padre Umberto touched my hands gently, and they dropped like dead weight in my lap. I lay back in the chair, unable to move. Why did you call me back so soon? We've only just started. I wasn't ready to come back, but we had been working for over an hour. After this, I frequently experienced similar things during my meditations. A sudden detachment from my body, a sense of floating far off, and I could see spirits hovering above my body. Many of them evil who wanted to harm it, but other beings benevolent and beautiful. I called them my guardian angels, and I knew they were protecting me from the evil ones. I felt safe and unafraid. My sensitivity and psychic awareness had increased greatly. Yet I knew for a fact I was not a full trance medium. I was deeply disappointed. Perhaps I just had not developed far enough. Although Pachita treated me with great affection, I sensed a radical, though subtle change in Hermanito's attitude towards me, which hurt me deeply. What was it in me that was barring my progress? I was not to know the answer to that question until more than a year later, but Hermanito gave me a clue during one of the curse operations in which I was assisting. I was praying intensely as Hermanito cut open a woman's abdomen when suddenly he looked up and pointed to me. Hurry, get her out of here. She is under attack from an evil one, he said to one of the women in the group. Brush her down with the carnations you'll find on the altar. Hurry. Then he added, it is just a precaution. She has a most powerful spirit protecting her. He looked up at me as he said this, and for a moment I was paralyzed by the hatred I saw in his face. The look was gone in a flash, and I never saw it again, but the impact remained with me. And that's the end of what chapter was that? 11? Nope, 10. And I will delete this on bitch because I'm not playing Fortnite. Plus, I'm sick of 5 coming to the channel. All right, that's it.